So, say hi to the people.
Hi, people.
We are going to be talking about self-love and self-care and how we care for ourselves. We're going into Valentine's week here, so I thought it would be appropriate to start talking about how we care for ourselves and not just, who we're sending a Valentine to. I figured a great way to also do that would be to engage in some self-care while we did it. So, what would you say if we went to put on some face masks?
Heck yeah.
All right, let's do it.
Let's go.
While Allison and I go put on our face masks, I would like to thank her for not only agreeing to be today's guest, but for also agreeing to wear face masks for today's episode. I know that's not exactly what she signed up for when she agreed to be today's guest, but I do really appreciate her being a trooper and just going with the flow, so thank you, Allison. I really appreciate you, and I definitely owe you one after this. I would also like to take this opportunity to welcome all of our new followers to the Healthy Humor podcast. If you haven't done so already, please go check out our new website at healthy-humor.com or give us a follow on YouTube at healthyhumor-docmb. And looks like Allison and I are coming back. So I hope you enjoy this episode on self-care and self-love. I definitely did a lot of these face masks and stuff whenever I was younger, because that's like the only thing I thought of as self-care. And I don't know if it's because of like all of the early 2000s rom-coms and things where the girls were like, we're gonna have a girls' night and we're gonna do face masks.
Yes.
And it was like always talking about face masks. But for a very long time, that's all I thought of.
Yeah, the montage with like the early 2000s, like the Y2K pop music.
Yes.
Like that was all you saw.
Exactly. And also, all of those girls for some reason owned a bunch of wigs.
Yeah, they all owned a bunch of wigs. They were all very skinny. Like they were all like very conventionally attractive.
Although, again, also they did still have a lot of wigs for some reason, but in the movie The Sleepover, I felt like they had, for the main cast, like the good girls in that, they did a better job of not just having them all look like copy and paste of each other, which was really nice.
I like that.
Yeah. And I don't think they did any face masks in that one.
Wow, revolutionary.
I know. But they still had the wigs, so...
The wigs were still there, check mark.
I know. But... Unrealistic expectations of wig ownership, though.
Yeah, I know.
So...
R.I.P. I wish I had that many wigs.
Yeah. So what do you do now for self-care?
So for me, self-care is a lot about like discipline and doing the hard things sometimes. So like doing things that I know are good for my body and good for my mental health, my physical health, but that can sometimes feel really difficult. So like going to bed at a reasonable hour, waking up early in the morning and going to the gym, or just exercising on a daily basis, making sure that I'm eating healthy. And I know that that doesn't sound like a relaxation thing, but I promise that it helps so much. Like I had started this like New Year's resolution of like, okay, I'm gonna go to the gym at least like 3 times a week. I'm not gonna put any huge expectations on myself. I'm just gonna go, maybe like walk on the treadmill for an hour, or just do like some yoga, or go to a class at the Y or something like that. And I feel like half of the battle for me was just disciplining myself enough to actually go and get into a habit of it. But once I started going for a week, I started to build the habit, and it felt so much easier. And it's a part of my day that I like look forward to in the morning. It's like, oh, I get to go to the gym today and work out and like listen to a podcast or listen to music and just like walk. And same thing with like eating healthy and like making healthy choices and going to bed at 10 or 11 p.m. instead of 2 a.m. like I was doing before. Like it's doing things that might feel hard in the moment, but the payoff is like so much better. And I think also like there are other things that I just like genuinely enjoy doing, and I don't have to like force myself to do them ever. So one thing for me that I really like cooking, and I really like the like therapeutic feeling that it gives me, and it's something that I do kind of like to unwind at the end of the day, and that is a form of self-care for me, is just being able to do like a mindless task. And for me, like cooking or baking or making a meal for somebody I love, it just kind of feels like a mindless task for me, and it's a way for me to kind of like turn my brain off, listen to music, listen to a podcast or an audiobook, and just get going.
Yeah. It's kind of funny though that, so like, I love that a lot of what you're saying is like, these are not the cooking part, but the before that, with the doing things that are kind of difficult, but ultimately they are good for you. So it really is like, to me, that's like the ultimate form of self-love, actually, because you're kind of making a little bit of like a sacrifice, but it's for yourself, and you know it's for yourself. And I feel like that is a way to be kind of like selfless, but still for yourself in a healthy way. But also, is what are your love languages? Because, and I know a lot of people don't hold stock in these, and I don't really all the time, because I think they're situational and dependent on like the context very much of like who you're in relationship with. Like the way I receive love from my parents is very different from the way I receive love from like my husband or other things like that. But I've definitely heard before that cooking and or baking and then feeding people with that is like a sixth love language.
Yeah.
So like, do you feel that way for yourself? Like it's not only a way you show yourself love, but also how you show love to other people?
Yeah, I think definitely, I guess that would kind of fall under the umbrella of like acts of service or maybe gift giving, which for me, like I would consider gift giving one of my like love languages that I do for other people. Like I don't really consider receiving gifts like one of my love languages. Acts of service for sure though, for me. So yeah, I think just like doing anything for somebody else, like cooking them a meal or, you know, just doing people favors is something that I use to like show people love.
Yeah. Okay. So when you're like, obviously you're scheduling some of this, right? Because it's becoming part of your routine or it's what you're doing every night when you get home from work. But do you ever like take a step back and you're like, wow, I have been so busy lately, I need to schedule some self-love? Or is that something that ever crosses your mind, like scheduling the time for it? Or is it just kind of happens as it happens?
Yeah, honestly, I don't really like, I'm not really like mindful about scheduling my self-care. I feel like I maybe should be at times. But for me, it's either like part of my routine, like you were saying, like every day I do X, Y, Z to take care of myself and to show up for myself. But also like, it's one of those things that I kind of also just do like as needed. So like if I've had a really hard day or something, I'm like, okay, I'm gonna go and lay in bed and watch a rom-com, or I'm gonna go and lay in bed and read my Kindle for 4 hours. Like, just like, if the time comes up where I feel like I need to show myself a little bit of extra gentleness, then I'll do it. But I think for the most part, it's something that's just kind of built into my routine on a day-to-day basis. But
And how do you think that differs from like when you were young? So I know we've talked before about like what I said earlier, like I used to think that face masks were the only way you could show self-love or engage in self-love. But so is this something that like you've always kind of slowly implemented into your life? Or do you think that when you were younger, your view of it was different, or the way you went about it was different?
Yeah, I think when I was like really young and like we were talking about, I feel like movies just kind of showed self-care as like, oh, I'm going to the spa today. I'm like putting cucumbers on my eyeballs. Like,
sorry, I didn't have any cucumbers here.
Right, I feel like I can't laugh because this is like,
I know. This one keeps moving a little bit, and I'm like, is it actually moving? I can't tell.
No, but I feel like, and this is gonna make me sound like so old to say this, but I feel like sometimes like social media and like specifically TikTok will tell you that self-care is just like doing whatever you want and you know, like shirking your responsibilities in the name of self-care, and that's not self-care, that is self-sabotage.
Yes.
Like, I think to a certain extent it's okay to, you know, be gentle with yourself, give yourself grace, that kind of thing. But at the same time, like self-care does not look like, you know, you eating 10 chocolate bars just because you're depressed or something. Like self-care is actually showing up for yourself every day. And that was like my New Year's resolution. Like I'm going to show up for myself every day. I'm going to, you know, make healthier decisions. I'm going to get my physical health back on track.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to get my mental and subsequently get my mental health back on track, because the two kind of go hand in hand. So I think I did kind of fall into that like trap of like, oh, self-care is just giving myself grace at every chance I get, which sometimes you kind of got to show yourself a little bit of discipline in order to, actually keep yourself on track.
Yeah, definitely. Like, one of the big ways I've been showing myself self-love recently has been, some of it has been showing myself grace, but in understandable ways, and not the, oh man, I just binged the newest season of whatever and spent 12 hours on the couch not doing anything. Like, that's not really self-love. It's like you said, it's self-sabotage. But I have been showing myself grace with like my to-do lists.
Yes.
Because I love to overcommit to what I'm going to be capable of doing in a day. And then at the end of the day, if I don't get everything on that list checked off, I feel like I'm a failure, or that I just didn't accomplish anything that day. But I've been trying to go back and I look at that list and I'm like, well, no, I actually did more than most people probably did that day, or like, okay, yes, I didn't get everything checked off, but was it even realistic for me to get everything checked off? No.
Right.
And I'm also trying to become more realistic about my to-do list for every day so that I am not self-sabotaging and then getting into that repetitive, oh, I failed, oh, I failed, oh, I failed.
Right.
And it's like you said, though, it's making those hard choices for our future self. Because sometimes we're like refilling the glass and then sometimes we're just topping it off.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's all about balance, right? Because like it's good to show yourself grace for things like that. Like it's good to be gentle with yourself, be understanding, and especially I feel like in the US in this day and age, like we live in like a hustle culture where if you're not productive, like that's the worst thing you can do. So like you have to be productive all the time. And I feel like you were saying, it's really good to take a step back, slow down, think about what you're doing on a day-to-day basis and what can we save for tomorrow, right?
Yeah.
And so yeah, I think like one of my favorite sayings is like, if you're hungry, eat, and if you're tired, sleep. And just like take a step back, don't shirk your responsibilities, but also understand that there are things that can wait until tomorrow. So
yeah. And I love that, the like, if you're hungry, eat, if you're tired, sleep, because I think that is something that we as Americans don't do. And it also goes back to what you said before, right before that, about this hustle culture. And again, I definitely feel like when we engage in self-care here in the US, it's viewed very differently, and not just viewed very differently than how it is in other countries, but even here, depending on who you're talking to, right? Like I have scoliosis and I have a lot of back pain that's associated with that. So I go and I get massages pretty regularly, but they're not like your normal massage. They're more like sports massages, almost like what an athletic trainer would do to like work specific areas. And it's for my back pain. But the looks that people give me sometimes when I tell them that I get regular massages, until I justify it to them, it's like, oh, you must have some luxurious life or do all these things. It's like, no, I am like taking care of myself so that way I don't like hurt myself and end up having to take several days off work,
right?
Or then not be able to clean or do these other things that bring me joy,
right?
And I think that a lot of people, that's how they view even their own self-care, and not just other people engaging in self-care. But this like, well, I simply cannot do that because I have responsibilities and I have these things I have to do. And I just feel like you're just slowly continuing to just drain your cup. And what happens when it's empty, right? Like they talk about burnout all the time. And then they talk about engaging in self-care to keep from burning out and having balance between your work and your home life. And that's so hard for us to do here. Because our education system, a lot of the media, everything, it's hustle, 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 get it done, get that paycheck, get that bread, whatever the saying is for the overindulgence in work.
Right.
So I definitely am agreeing with what you're saying on that.
Yeah, and I feel like we live in a culture that kind of rewards like being a workaholic, and that's a whole nother topic because there's a lot of other countries that aren't like that.
Right.
And so yeah, it's very complicated.
Yeah. And I think it's like we reward this hustle culture and this overworking culture, but at the same time everyone's goal is, let me retire early at 40 and go live on the beach and not have any real responsibilities. But we're also, no one's actually working hard enough, or not even hard enough, just like in that way that's an achievable goal anyway. Like the average person can't do that.
Right.
So why is that somehow this arbitrary goal that we have when we also don't even take care of ourselves?
Right. Exactly.
So, yeah. Along same veins of everything here, is there anything that someone's ever told you about like the way that they engaged in self-care, or they were like, hey, you should do this, I think you'd really like find fulfillment out of it, or that it would, replenish you in some way, that you were just like, that's such a great idea and you maybe hadn't heard it before?
Yeah, so I was telling you a little while ago about this lady that I saw on, I think it was like Instagram or TikTok or something. But when she's just like out and about, like she's at TJ Maxx or she's at Sephora or Target or wherever, and she sees like a little trinket or a little face mask or just like a little something that she likes that's relatively inexpensive, like she never spends probably more than like $15 on any one thing, she'll get it. And then she has a bin in the top of her closet where she just puts all of these little things. And anytime she has like a hard day, or maybe a day when she was really successful or achieved something, or like a good day, something like that, she'll just like go up in that little bin and just pick something out of it that she kind of just like forgot that she may have bought. And I feel like that's something I need to start doing, because I feel like I buy so much. Like, this also speaks to overconsumption, which is a form of self-sabotage too. but I feel like I do buy a lot of things that I forget about. And so that would be like kind of a productive way, or like a healthy way to, do that kind of thing where like you're over consuming a little bit, but it'll make you happy in the future. Just like giving yourself a little surprise, giving yourself a little Santa gift.
But I like that.
Yeah.
And if I ever did that, I'd probably like not look at it when I reached for it.
Yeah.
It's just like a little grab.
Yeah, that's what she does. It's just like, oh, what am I gonna get today? But yeah.
I like that. I think that would also help me, because I have a problem with going to places like Ross and TJ Maxx and just being like, oh, it's a great deal.
Yeah.
I can buy this.
Yes.
But I also have a thing where I love to justify my purchases. And if it's a purchase for something for me, I feel like I doubly have to justify it. But if it's something for somebody else, it's so much easier. Like Warren and I have this, we call it the gift closet. It's a little like cabinet, like slidey drawers thing, but we call it the gift closet. And the idea is like, if I'm out and about and I see something and I'm like, oh, that would be such a great gift for this person, I go ahead and I buy it. Then if it's a good deal, especially if it's a good deal, I go ahead and I buy it, and then it goes in that little closet, and then we know, okay, their next birthday or Christmas or whatever, we have a gift for them. But it scratches that little itch that I have to want to overconsume. But I'm able to justify it because it's for somebody else.
Yeah.
And hopefully I got a good deal on it or something like that. But I don't often want to do that for myself. But I feel like this idea would allow me to do that.
Yeah.
Because it's like controlled in a way.
Right.
And it's just not, nearly as expensive as like some other ways of showing yourself self-care, or as hard as actually going to bed on time, which is very difficult.
Yeah, no, it is.
I think that some advice that I received, and I know I've used the cup and glass metaphor several times already since we've been sitting here, but like that's one that, and I know that it's one that they actually use in psychology. It's not just that people say it, like it's a real metaphor that is used. But you can't pour into someone else's glass if yours isn't full. Like, you're not taking care of yourself. And as an educator and as someone who you know, at a very young age was like the mom of whatever friend group she was in, I feel like I've always kind of poured into other people, and I haven't always poured back into myself. And there have been times where it's really caught up to me for sure. And so like trying to do that for other people has helped. And sometimes I think like you can show your self-love and someone else at the same time. Sorry, it's just a little gnat. It's probably from the houseplants. Sorry. But I think it's also easy sometimes, like we said, you can start overindulging or indulging in behaviors that are being deemed self-care, and it's like, no, you're actually self-sabotaging.
Yeah, and you're just enabling yourself.
Right. So actually, like, to prepare for this episode, when I was looking up things about self-care and self-love, one of the things that I found was, I know you know who Immanuel Kant is, and for anyone listening or watching who does not, he was a philosopher, and that's really all you need to know about him for what I'm going to say.
For our purposes.
Yes, but if you're interested in more, I will put the proper spelling of his name in the comments for this. But no, there was this paper that I was reading, and it was discussing Immanuel Kant and his ideas and ideologies and things, and one of his papers has historically always been interpreted as him saying that there is no good self-care, there is no good self-love, that it is basically sinful to self-love. But the author that I was reading, who was comparing those interpretations with his interpretation of other works by Kant, was saying that what he actually believed was there is good and bad self-love. And that is something that once I started looking into that, I found a lot more information on. And essentially there's this idea that like good self-love is the self-love that is not just for the sake of self-love. Like it could be showing yourself grace, or it could be setting a boundary for yourself. And it's doing these things out of, you know, beneficence and this desire to do good and do better for yourself, and not out of like the delight of taking care of yourself. Because that's the idea here was like, if you're overindulging in self-love, you're just doing it for the sake of feeling good from it and not for what it's doing for you. And then that's when it can become a problem. Like either you start engaging in it too much, or it can lead you down a rabbit hole of only engaging in self-love and not being able to put into other people's cups. So like you basically become addicted to filling your own cup,
right,
and can't then pour into other people's cup because you also hate the idea of losing any of what's in your cup.
Right.
And I found that really interesting because, you know, especially, you know, growing up in this part of the country, like you hear all the time about, you know, you need to go take care of other people. You know, you need to go volunteer your time. You need to do these things, which I love doing. I love volunteering, but also like, who's volunteering to take care of me? I mean, yeah, my friends and my family are doing a great job of taking care of me. I'm not trying to say anything about that, but you know, sometimes it's really hard to tell like how much someone's life and world is weighing on them, and you can look at yourself and say, my cup is getting a little too empty right now. I need to go fill it back up, not only to take care of other people, but to continue to take care of myself in even just some of the basic ways.
Right. Yeah, and I think it comes down to like a difference between self-love versus selfishness. And I feel like there are different forms of selfishness, right? Like it's kind of exists on a spectrum is how I think of it. And like selfishness in the sense of like, I'm going to take care of myself so I can be a better wife or husband, or so I can be a better friend, or you know, daughter or whatever, versus like, I'm going to just indulge in all of my my like most horrible habits in the name of self-care. Like I'm gonna smoke a cigarette because I want one. Like, just like there are things that you can do that are very bad for you, but you justify them in the name of self-care sometimes. And so it's all about finding that balance. Like it always comes down to balance.
Yeah. And I think ultimately, you know, based on like what we've talked about and what I was researching, just that real self-love isn't going to be bad for you. Like the kind of self-love that actually does refill your cup, or isn't crossing into that like selfish or
Right.
possibly dangerous zone of self-love, or this whole, you know, we're making excuses just so we can do things and calling it self-love, is that it's not always easy. And it's not always putting on a face mask and dancing to some music montage that no one knows where it came from and pulling out wigs. It's going to bed on time. It's giving yourself grace. It's sticking to a schedule. It's doing the things that ultimately make you either better as a person or better able to take care of yourself. I think that that's something that like a lot of people don't think about whenever they look at self-love and self-care. And I would be willing to bet there's a lot of people that the only self-love that they do is, you know, a face mask whenever they happen to have some free time, or when someone else suggests it, instead of, oh yeah, like I need to go take care of myself.
Right.
So yeah. How's your face mask feeling? Because mine's feeling kind of...
Yeah, she's crispy.
Yeah, so is mine. Well, why don't we go take these off and then come back and say goodbye?
Yeah, sounds good.
Okay. While Allison and I are in the other room taking our face masks off, I would like to thank her one more time for being a guest on today's show, and I would also like to thank all of you again for tuning in to this new episode of Healthy Humor. I hope that today's episode really made you, you know, take a look at the way you're caring for yourself and maybe evaluate your own self-care routine, or maybe lack thereof if you're like the majority of us. And also just remind everyone to give us a follow or to reach out with any topics or information or stories that you would like me to cover, or interviews you'd love to see me do. Okay, so we're back. We're fresh-faced. Any last words for our listeners and viewers?
Take care of yourselves. Yeah, that's it.
Couldn't have said it any better. Well, until next time, have a healthy day.